introduce the topic today of the 4th edition of the Leading Change Toolkit. And I would like to introduce Katherine Wallace. And Katherine is a registered nurse and previously a registered midwife. Katherine has worked at RNAO since 2013. She is currently a senior manager in the implementation science team. Katherine was a project lead for the Leading Change Toolkit development team and a co-author of the Social Movement Action Framework. With RNAO colleagues, Katherine supported the development of the Best Practice Champions Competencies Framework and regularly co-facilitated the Best Practice Champions Blended Learning Series live sessions. It is my privilege and honor to introduce my coworker and my mentor, Katherine Wallace.
Thanks, Julianne. A pleasure to be with all of you today, and a pleasure to be with Andrea and Julianne again. Just saw them yesterday as we did a Champions live session. So thanks to all of you. If you are a champion, for the great work that you do, and we hope that our Leading Change Toolkit plays a role in making you even more effective in the role and work that you do in the implementation of best practice guidelines and other evidence-based tools. So our Leading Change Toolkit, it's now in its 4th edition, as you heard. And really is the work of so many people and hands and knowledge. So huge thanks to the development team at RNAO, to our IM&T department who helped to create this online resource. And we also worked in partnership this time with Healthcare Excellence Canada, formerly CPSI, who helped as a co-sponsor to support the development of our Leading Change Toolkit in its 3rd and now 4th edition. And so, as you can see, it was developed for people like yourselves to make lasting improvements in healthcare. It's a resource that focuses on guideline implementation, knowledge translation, knowledge uptake, and sustainability. Lots of different ways we can say essentially the same thing, but can be used not only for organizations directly involved in healthcare, but also academic sites, social service organizations, etc. Any organization that's using a source of evidence and wants to use that to make a practice change. And again, that can be used across sectors and across different kinds of organizations. So we hope that you are finding it helpful, or if it's new to you, that you will find it helpful in future work. Okay, and it lives on the RNAO website, and so you will find it on the rnao.ca. And my intention here is I've got a few slides to share, just some screenshots from the website, and then we'll switch gears and have a look on the live website as well. So again, we're in our 4th edition. We made some new changes, features, and kept much of the same content as well. And so let's do a bit of a walkthrough so you better understand what's in the toolkit and how you can use it most effectively to support planning for change, making change happen, and sustaining change. And as we say that, that also is the basis or the foundation for our blended learning series. For those of you who are more recent champions, you'll be familiar with that approach to change that we also use as part of that learning offering that supports our champions. So something you may be aware of is that at RNAO, we have an integrated BPG pillar model that supports our BPG program. That begins with our guideline development, and really that's our starting point for creating change. And as champions, we want and need to have the confidence that the guideline that we're using as a knowledge tool and knowledge resource really is developed to the highest standards, and that gives us the confidence, the trust in this source of knowledge to be able to inform and shape a change initiative. So our guidelines, over 50 of them, available at no cost on our RNAO website, and they follow international standards in terms of methodology using GRADE or grades or qual. So not only a systematic review, but that quality appraisal of the literature. But we don't stop there. And something that makes us unique as an association and as guideline developers is that we also have these two other pillars. And the two other pillars focus on, as you can see, dissemination, implementation, and sustainability, as well as monitoring and evaluation. And it's this recognition that to create a guideline is a great starting point for change. But in order to do that, we need action, we need champions, we need processes and people in order to make that change. So again, this focus on dissemination, implementation, and sustainability. And you can see that we have initiatives at the micro, the personal, the organizational level, as well as at the system level. And so for all of you who join as champions, then we offer, as you know, our best practice champions training and supports through these webinar series. And then at the organization level, our BPSO program. And again, many of us join us from there. And some of you also from long-term care are available, also participating in the clinical pathways program. And then a number of initiatives at the system level. And again, all of those are embedding best practice guidelines and the promotion of evidence-based practice as a way of achieving quality improvement and clinical excellence. Okay, so we have been in the guideline development business, if you will, since about 1998. And by 2002, I believe we had about 5 guidelines available. And then by 2005, you can see our very first edition of the toolkit was published. I don't know if you did a bit of a deep dive in Google, if you could find that still. It might be an interesting read, but it really would reflect our limited understanding, ours at RNAO and ours collectively as change agents, about implementation and how to do it and do it effectively. And I believe in that first edition, we didn't even talk about sustainability. We really were focused on just planning and achieving change. And the idea of sustaining change was something that was a bit of a future concept. And then fast forward 2012, many of you familiar with this edition, was a print edition that was shared widely. We shared it at our Best Practice Champions workshops when we were doing those in person. So that was our toolkit, implementation of best practice guidelines. And then we moved to online for our 2020, our third edition, and now we fast forward to 2024, and we have our most latest edition of our Leading Change Toolkit. And the biggest change from the second edition to the third and the fourth is really the inclusion of our social movement action framework, and we'll touch on that briefly. So what are you going to find in this new edition? So this again is much like our third edition, but with some additional features that help with the navigation of finding what it is you need in the Leading Change Toolkit. There is a lot of content. We are covering 4 broad topic areas, so there's lots of ground to cover, lots of things to consider, and lots of great resources. So one of the things that we wanted to do with our 4th edition was really to make it such that you could find what you're looking for, find the tools, find the resources, or find a page that talks about a specific aspect of change that you are looking for. So it is at no cost, lives on our RNAO website, is meant to be utilized online, although there are pages that can be printed, but really was developed as an online implementation resource. And for that, then there's lots of links, which I'll discuss. It focuses on knowledge uptake and sustainability. So again, if you're using a guideline or other evidence-based tool and you're interested in knowing how do we take this resource and actually use it to create a change, then that's the focus of our Leading Change Toolkit. As you'll see when we look live on the website, we have in-text glossary terms. So you'll see some words that are underlined. No, they're not typos. They are glossary terms. And if you hover over it, you can see a brief definition of that term to help with comprehension and understanding of what it is that we mean in the context of change. And then we also have lots of link content that will help you to be able to move around the website, and then also linked content to other resources that can help to further and expand your knowledge. We want to make this accessible to as many people as possible. And we know that we have both BPSOs are best practice spotlight organizations here in the province of Ontario, across Canada, as well as internationally. And so to support accessibility to our Leading Change Toolkit, we offer it in a number of different languages. So we currently have the English and Spanish translations available. We have a French translation that will soon be created, just a matter of creating these pages, as well as a simplified Chinese version as well. So watch for that. And we'll hope to continue to grow and expand our Leading Change Toolkit. As you'll see, we have many examples from case studies, and those we continue to add as we see great examples from organizations of how they have made change and integrated some of the elements that are featured in our Leading Change Toolkit. So the Leading Change Toolkit consists of these 4 main sections. So let's look at those, beginning with this 2 complementary frameworks. So again, in our Leading Change Toolkit, we have the Social Movement Action Framework that focuses on a people-led approach to change, and our Knowledge to Action Framework, which again was part of our 3rd and 2nd editions of the toolkit. And our focus here is really on using the 2 frameworks to be able to accelerate success. In other words, take an approach that engages people in change and really focus on the people first, because we know that change is a social process. It's done by and with people. So we need to pay attention to the people and how can we strategically, intentionally engage people in change. And then secondly, we need to know how to make change. And for that, the knowledge to action as a structured change model can be very, very helpful to us. But using it together, really bringing the people together for something that they care about in terms of a change, and then knowing how to make change can really set us up for success as champions and members of change teams. So again, here is our social movement action framework. This was based on a concept analysis. So we studied the concept of social movement action for knowledge uptake and sustainability. And from that, we created this framework divided according to the 3 time points of preconditions of the planning for change or getting started with change, the key characteristics, which are the 10 elements that must be present in order for social movement action to occur, and then the outcomes. What happens as a result of applying social movement action and putting that into play? And we know as an approach to change, it is powerful, it can be very effective. Again, we have to have people engaged in change in order to really achieve the goals and be able to sustain change. And then in addition, we also have our knowledge to action framework. Again, maybe you are familiar with this, the 2 broad components of this framework of knowledge creation that results in a knowledge tool or product, which for us is our best practice guidelines. But the recognition that the publication of a guideline, the reading of a guideline does not make a practice change. We need to take action through these 7 action cycle phases in order to do so. And again, if you're familiar with our blended learning series, we talk lots about this in our 4-part learning offering. Now, again, the 4th section of our Leading Change Toolkit is engaging persons with lived experience in your change. So many of you may have change teams that are guiding and leading a change process. We hope that's the way that you are approaching change, that it's not one person making change, but rather doing it together, doing it as part of a team, whether a change team, implementation team, steering committee, whatever you call those individuals, and that some of those members of your change team may include persons with lived experience. Maybe they're residents, maybe they're family members, maybe they're individuals who have used services in your organization, etc. And recognizing that they bring other and important perspectives regarding change, and that ultimately, in many cases, the change we're making is focusing on the needs of these individuals. So to give them a voice and a place at the table in terms of making the change can be really effective. So some considerations about how to do that and do that most effectively is part of our Leading Change Toolkit. Okay, in terms of some of the sections that you'll find, and again, some of these now have standalone pages as a way of drawing more attention to this content and helping with the navigation so that it has an improved end user experience. That ultimately was our goal. And so as you'll see, so again, this is a screenshot taken from the web page, and we'll have a look at this live on the web page in a moment. But we have a page that's dedicated to implementation tools. So by that, we mean things like checklists, resource pages, worksheets, etc. And as you can see from the slide, we structure those according to the social movement action framework, the knowledge to action framework, engaging persons with lived experience, as well as the two complementary frameworks. So you're able then to find what you're looking for. And then you can see on the left-hand side, we have tags, and the tags access filters. So if you're looking for specifically an implementation tool that will support adapting to local context, you could click that and see what are the relevant tools for that specific focus of the KTA model. You also will find valid KTA tools. So these are tools that can be used to support the action cycle phases, 4 of the action cycle phases that make up the knowledge to action framework. This work was done by a working group that was part of our expert panel, as well as some students. And we were very fortunate to have one of the co-authors of the KTA framework, Dr. Ian Graham, who participated not only in the expert panel, but also in this work as well. And so you can have confidence if Dr. Graham felt that you could use this tool as part of, excuse me, identifying the problem or assessing barriers and facilitators to knowledge use, that it is a tool that can be used and maybe something that helps to support that phase of change. So again, we'll have a look at that on the website. We also have a standalone page for case studies. So these are also embedded in the one-pagers on all of the framework components. But we also have a standalone page on case studies. And the case studies really give us great illustrations of framework components and bring that element to life, really seeing how we can use the frameworks to achieve and sustain change. Not dissimilar from this webinar series that we have as part of our Best Practice Champions Network, where we hear from organizations, our BPSOs, the work that they're doing in the webinar presentations. This is sort of along the same lines that we have a case study. It's a short case study, but it gives a way of illustrating and giving more meaning to some of the components that we're talking about in a framework that sometimes at first glance can seem a little bit more theoretical. And again, that content can be tagged using those filters. Again, in the About section, and that's, I'm just moving my mouse, I don't know if you can see that, we'll look at it live as well. In the About section, there are many appendices, including Appendix A, which is a glossary of terms. So again, when we use terminology in the Leading Change Toolkit, you'll know what that's about. And you'll see there's a definition and a brief definition. The brief definition is what you'll see that's cited in text, and then you can also refer to this Appendix A for the full glossary terms. Appendix G is the statements of interest. I never knew if that was a great title for this particular appendix, but that's what we went with. And so this includes some of the statements that you may or may not be looking for. So a disclaimer about the use of the Leading Change Toolkit. You can see there's a funding statement. There's a statement regarding a declaration of conflict of interest that related to our expert panel. And then there's also the copyright statement. This is not that dissimilar from what you would find in a guideline, in that what it says is that as a free online resource, you are welcome to use any of this content, take it and use it for your own purposes. We ask as an RNAO intellectual property that you do cite it, and we provide then the citation to use. You're also asked, and this is no different than a BPG, if you're using content and modifying it, that you reach out to us and ask for permission to do so. Otherwise, any of this content can be freely used in any of your change initiatives. Again, we just ask you please to recognize it as the Leading Change Toolkit as per the copyright statement. Okay, and now my last slide before we switch to the website is just to let you know that we do also have a reference list. This is in the About section. Um, it is structured according to the titles of the articles, which may or may not be the way in which you're looking for content. You can also search by author name or by keyword. And where there is a open source to a resource, we have included that link as well. So that's meant to be just an overview as far as just our slides, and then we'll switch gears now and we'll stop our share, and then I can show us the website. So I think, Julianne, are you doing that? Yes. Okay, perfect. Thanks. And how are we doing for time? I have a tendency to have too much to say.
You
Okay.
think we're doing great, Catherine.
Thank you. Thanks. Okay. Phew. Okay, so here we are on the website, and you can see that. Julianne will give me a thumbs up that she can see that. Perfect. Okay, so again, this lives on the RNAO website. So I want you to be aware when you look at this, rnao.ca/BPG/leading change toolkit, or you can just do a search for Leading Change Toolkit. That might be an easy way. That it is on the RNAO website. So you will find then this first top menu, and if we had our members of IMNT here, they'd tell me what this is called. But anyways, here, for example, is where you'll find BPGs, and Leading Change Toolkit lives under there as well. And also our Best Practice Champions Network is also under this heading. You all are familiar with the events page. So lots and lots of information available on this first top menu. And then we have the menu here that's for the Leading Change Toolkit. And as I've identified, there's four key or broad sections of the toolkit, the two complementary frameworks, SMA framework, KTA, and engaging persons with lived experience. And then the top menu, and there isn't a pull down menu here except for the About. This will simply, when you click on it, will take you to that specific page, implementation tools, valid KTA tools, case studies. Again, we pulled these out just so to give them more visibility and help with navigation. And then our About section will have all of this one does have a pull down menu and all of that information that you may be looking for. So I am going to do some scrolling now. I'll try and minimize it just for eyes and tummies. But again, here is our home page of Leading Change Toolkit. Really highlights what you're going to find in this resource, as you might expect. And so let's first look at the how to use the toolkit. And in this, what you will see at the top of all of these pages, the way they're structured is an index. And the index will kind of disappear as we scroll down the page. And then on the right-hand side is this menu. Now, if you don't want it as you scroll down, and it won't cover any of the text, you are able to close it just by clicking this button, and then it essentially disappears. Otherwise, you can use it just as a jumping point to reach whatever content you're looking for. So what this is going to describe to you is then how to navigate or find what you're looking for in the Leading Change Toolkit. So it describes, as we've just talked about, these four broad sections. Again, apologies for scrolling. And then how you might use the toolkit. So you might use it by framework. Maybe you're really interested in KTA. And for each of the 7 action cycle phases, you will find an article page or a full page that is about that framework. So in our 3rd edition, we had a lot of, it was organized in a book format where you had to click. There was a small amount of content, and then you click to the next page, click to the next page. Now it's scrolled, so it's all on one page. Now we have for KTA 7 action cycle phases. For SMA, we have 16 elements. That's a lot to keep track of when we're thinking about change. So we also have another way of approaching change, which is by journey. And we then structure it according to 3 time points of change. And for a lot of us, this might be a much more manageable way to think about change. And as we approach change, we often are in a planning phase, in a making change happen phase, or in a sustaining change, recognizing that there's a lot of interactive components in all 3 of these phases, and there isn't really a start-stop for each of these phases. They kind of just bleed into one another and inform one another. And if you're familiar with our newer offering for champions, our blended learning series, we take a similar approach as far as how we structure, how we talk about change. But we have the option too that you can look at it as per the framework as well, whatever works best for you and what you're looking for. So now let's have a look at planning for change. And what we've done here is really pull together from the two frameworks, social movement action, knowledge action framework, engaging persons, and the two complementary frameworks. What would be all the pieces of that that you would want to consider when you're in the phase of planning for change? So again, I'm going to do a bit of a scroll here. And what you'll see on this page and how it's structured is that we've got links to some of the relevant pages for each of the two frameworks on the left-hand side. And then on the right-hand side are some examples of the many case studies. Again, those are illustrating these examples of the frameworks and the planning for change phase to give you more ideas. And again, our thanks to our BPSOs for sharing so graciously the work that they're doing, and more importantly, the great work that they're doing in general. In addition, on this same page on planning for change, here you're also going to find we've pulled together the implementation tools. Again, these are the checklists, the resource pages, the worksheets that are relevant for planning for change. And then we've organized them according to the frameworks. So we could click on this PDF, for example, and this is an example of a page you can print if you wish on something on getting started with change. It's a checklist and can be very helpful for change agents if they're new to SMA and want to know for each of the elements how they could get started. Not in any prescriptive way, but just to give you some ideas. We also have to figure out with change what makes sense in our local setting. So, but these implementation tools can be really helpful. So again, they're just organized according to the two frameworks, as you can see. And then if we keep scrolling down, again, apologies for scrolling, engaging persons, again, some examples of that. And then we have at the very bottom at the footer, then you'll be able to then link to the other two journeys of making change happen and sustaining change. And they, again, are structured in much the same way where we have examples of some of the article pages, some of the case studies, and some of the implementation tools. Now, to go back to the top, I just click the home button. I learned that from my IM&T friends. All right, we've looked at this, how to navigate, how to use the Leading Change Toolkit and thinking about the toolkit in terms of frameworks as far as and as well as the journeys. So now we can click on, let's go to the SMA framework. And if you're using both of these frameworks, we encourage you to start with social movement action to really think about the people involved in the change and how can we make the most of the people, their energy for change, what matters to them. And again, you can see this framework, and I know many of you are familiar with this. And again, we've got the preconditions of where we get started and then the key characteristics that tells us what do we need to have in place in order to make change. And we highlight a lot of this in our champions in our blended learning series. So for example, if we look under key characteristics, if you can see the emergence of leaders. You know, we talk a lot about in champions about using your voice to speak out for the need for change, to champion a change, to understand the role of agency, to understand your why. What is it you want to champion? So the emergence of leadership talks a lot about that. And tied to that is intrinsic motivation. What's important to us? Well, you know, why is it we show up every day to work and do what it is that we do? We know with social movement action, with any change, there always has to be action, action that we take as individuals and together as a collective. So the focus on individual and collective action talks about that. We also know that we need to have public visibility about our change to establish a collective or a shared identity. We need momentum. You know, we need to feel like that change is progressing. So that section on momentum can be very helpful. And then on core leadership structures, which is maybe a too fancy way of just saying a change team. And we're going to have a look at that content in a moment. So just this homepage for SMA has the three broad sections that make up this framework, and then links to each of the pages. So again, whatever you're looking for, you will find this here. So let's have a look at core leadership structures. And again, structured in much the same way as far as having the index and the menu. And what you'll see for all of the sections on SMA is similar index headings. So it'll begin with what is this element and why is it important? So why is a change team important in the context of change? And what are some of the key elements? What are some of the considerations? Sort of more of theoretical understanding. Then you can see we've got case studies to give that illustration. Again, thanks to our BPSOs for sharing those examples. And then we want to get practical because this is a toolkit. So what are some considerations for getting started as change teams? How do we find the people to be part of a change team? How can they meet and work together as change teams? But then we've got a section on navigating common problems. We'll have a look at that in a moment. But it appreciates that change rarely unfolds perfectly, despite our plans, despite what's written in an action plan. And so, how are we going to navigate common problems? So we got a section on that. And then, as we get going with our change team, checking our progress. How do we know if we're making steps ahead as far as being a change team or whatever aspect of the framework we are focused on. And then we've got, again, the implementation tools. These are the same that we saw on the implementation tool, that standalone page, but here they're specific to change teams. So another way of finding that content. And then we've got a page on or a section on linking this specific characteristic to other framework components, and then more resources in case you want to learn even more. So again, just looking at navigating common problems. And when I click on that, there we go. It'll just jump down and then you'll see some content here. And for all of these, we've got identify common problems and then some strategies, some ideas to help to address the problem. Again, you really need to think about your own context and what makes sense for you. So these are just meant to be some ideas that might help you begin addressing some of these issues. So something like we need to find new members for our change team. That often happens. Lots of people come and go in organizations. Or maybe we have a problem with one person dominating a change team. And how do we navigate that? Or we have somebody that's not attending the meetings. And again, how will we navigate some of that? So some of the content then you'll find in this section. So again, I hit the home button. That takes me back up to the top. And now we'll look at our home page for KTA. And how am I doing for time? Oh, I'm supposed to be almost done. So that's okay. So on the KTA framework, again, a brief discussion of the two broad components of this framework, the knowledge creation process, as well as the action cycles, the 7 action cycle phases. You'll see they are listed numerically here. There is no one starting point for KTA, just like there's no real one starting point for change. So you can use any of these cycles to help you and wherever you are at. Let's have a quick look at the assess barriers and facilitators to knowledge use. Again, as far as how this is structured, it's sort of similar, not exactly the same headings in the index, but we begin with the discussion. What is the phase and why is it important? How does it contribute to a change process? You've got case studies. And then again, we want to have some practical information. So we've got practice tips. We have our valid KTA tools, our check the progress. How does this link to other framework components? So that's within KTA as well as SMA, and then other resources. So maybe I'll just finish just with our valid KTA tools. So again, these are ones that can be used for specific action cycle phases. And for each of these tools, they're tools that can help us with, in this case, assessing barriers and facilitators. And for each one of these, you're going to find 2 pages per tool. So one that's describing the tool, its purpose, its description, and a link to how you can actually find the tool. And then there's a companion document, and that details the tool's pragmatic and psychometric properties. So this work, again, was done by a subgroup of our expert panel. And what we did was we sent these tools to BPSOs and other champions and said, if you were to use this tool, is it something that's feasible to use, that's usable, just based on the current state of this tool, and got some feedback. And so we only included the ones that sites felt were pragmatic, feasible, something that was fairly easy to use in a change initiative. So again, in here, you will find further down all of the tools that are listed. You'll also find a couple other additional resources which you can have a look at. One is a summary table of all of the tools. May or may not recognize the name of the tools. Many of them focus on things like attitudes towards evidence-based practice. Some of them are geared specifically to populations like students or specific healthcare providers. And then there's also a document about considerations for using these tools, things like how to choose a tool, then how to use the tool. And then finally here you will find the list of all of these tools, and this you just can scroll and find them. And again, the names may or may not be meaningful for you, but if you click on one of these, I'll just pick one of them. And again, there's two. Then you will see the description of this. It tells the purpose, the description, etc. And then there is a link to the tool. Okay, I think I'm going to stop there because Julianne's going to tell me that I am out of time. So we have a few minutes for questions and any other comments you may have. So I'll say thanks for the opportunity just to share a little bit about the Leading Change Toolkit. And certainly if you have questions, you can always reach out to me or members of the team. Over to you, Julianne.
Thank you, Katherine. Wow. Thank you for walking us through the Leading Change Toolkit. It really is such a wonderful online tool designed to support the implementation of best practice guidelines and other evidence-based tools. We know that this tool will power the healthcare teams to make that positive change. So it's very exciting. Thank you. We do have for some questions. I would like to open it up to all of our participants. You could raise your hand and we can unmute you and you could ask Katherine the question, or if you would rather just type your question in the chat, that's fine. But please do, while Katherine is here, ask those questions regarding this toolkit, and Katherine would be happy to answer them for you. Katherine, I do see a question here in the chat. It says there are several valid tools that can be used in 4 of the key KTA action cycle phases. Do we need permission of the authors of those tools to access them?
And so the answer is it depends. And that will be detailed on that first document that describes the tool itself. So again, that will describe the purpose of the tool, so what it is that it's measuring. And that allows you then, if you're using a valid tool, to not have to make up your own tool. And when the team looked at whether it was a valid tool, they're looking at mostly for concept validity. Does it truly measure the concept and all of its components? And so have confidence in using that if it's measuring attitudes towards evidence-based practice, that it's really is doing just that. And the details of that tool page description does include where you can find the tool. Sometimes it's a link to the article that describes how they developed the tool, and you'll find the tool in that. In other cases, you do have to reach out to the developer, and they will give you permission. And that, again, was the work of this working group who did the investigation to see, can we actually just access the tool, or do we need to go one extra step and just get permission from the developer? But many of them available online. But what it will open to is a published research article, and then you'll just search for where the tool itself is.
Oh, okay. I see. Very good. There's another question here that's popped up. If you are new to change and find using 2 frameworks a little overwhelming, is there a tool to determine which tool would be better to use? When would SMA be better than KTA? That's a great question.
Yeah, so in the implementation tools, there is a decision tool, and you'll also find it in the 2 complementary frameworks. Sorry, I'm scrolling again here. I think I'm still sharing. Let's see, is it right under here? Yeah, so there is, if you can see this, download the worksheet, a decision tool for change teams to guide the selection of a framework. So we developed it according to the thinking of questions like what is the change, who's making the change, where are we making the change, why, etc. And it really gets you to consider which one might be better for you. And sometimes the KTA might work better. SMA really is that people-led grassroots approach to change, so not so much a top-down approach to change. So that's where SMA may be better suited. Perhaps a top-down approach to KTA or to a change could be KTA, although KTA is not only for top-down change. And also, just as we look at this part of the Leading Change Toolkit, you'll see we do have throughout the toolkit plugs for our Best Practice Champions Network to encourage people to get the training to be able to know more about SMA and KTA. Our blended learning series does focus a lot on both of these frameworks.
Wonderful. Okay. Any other questions? Feel free to raise your hand and we can unmute you. Type your questions in the chat. We really appreciate your participation.
Yeah, and it's a toolkit, right? So you take what you need. You just think of any kind of toolkit we use different components on a different day. So, but again, one of the key takeaways, it's that change is a social process. It doesn't occur in isolation, and we really want to think about the people involved in change and how can we best support them as change agents, as staff, as members of change teams to do change in a way that's meaningful, that ultimately leads to achieving and sustaining change.
Yes, that's wonderful. So many resources all at our fingertips. And you're right, it's nice to think of it as a little toolkit. So, you can go in there and get what you need. So much more organized than my toolkit here at home, Katherine. So very nice. Oh, let's see. I think we have something on the chat again, Katherine, if you give me a moment. Thank you for your question. So it's any recommendations on how teams can go about starting work with the toolkits? For example, would you recommend we talk about this toolkit at a staff meeting and link it to the initiatives expressed in interest for that staff meeting? So that's a great question. So how can someone bring this forward to their team?
Yeah, I think making them aware it's freely available on the RNAO website. I think that if you're looking at how do we work together as a change team, and the focus of change team is to be able to work together as a team. That's the inward facing component of a change team. And then the outward facing is how do we work with staff? So we engage them in the change process. And it's not just this small change team that's doing all the work of change and the staff just sort of passively watching it. So maybe starting with that core leadership structure might be, and that's part of SMA. And again, focusing on the people of change, that's things like the emergence of leadership and individuals, both in formal and informal roles, becoming leaders of change. And again, we emphasize a lot of that in our Champions workshop. And then also thinking about how do we make change happen? And for many of us, that starts with an identified problem that leads us to selecting a BPG or other knowledge tool, and then doing that gap analysis to determine the no-do gap, and then taking it from there, basically. So again, really thinking about the people and the process.
Right, that's exactly right. Using that social movement. That's wonderful. And a copy of today's presentation slides will be emailed to our participants, which will also be a wonderful resource to have. And today has been recorded. So I don't see any other questions, Katherine. So I think that's all for today. But thank you so much for your time and for the journey through the toolkit. That was very enriching. Thank you.
Thanks everyone for coming today. And again, any questions, please don't hesitate to reach out. And again, huge thanks to our team for working on the Leading Change Toolkit.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone. Have a good afternoon.
Thanks, everyone. Bye-bye.